The plates were still warm. Steam curled off the last pan I rinsed. I could hear them laughing in the living room. Not with me, never with me. I turned off the water. Wrung out the cloth. The same checkered one I've used for years. My fingers ached from the heat. Wrinkled. Tired. But not as tired as my heart. She cleans better than our maid used to, Paula giggled. A fork clattered against a plate. Elijah chuckled back. Not a word in my defense. Not a glance toward the kitchen. Just laughter. As if I couldn't hear. As if I didn't matter. I sat on the wooden stool by the sink. The same one I used to lift Elijah up when he wanted to see how cookies baked. Now he couldn't lift a finger for me. The tiled floor was cool under my bare feet. Somewhere in the house the heater buzzed. But not here. I wiped my hands and stared at the sponge. Frayed. Like me. I thought about the house I gave up. 2 bedrooms, yellow shutters, creaky porch swing. I sold it to help Elijah. Back then, he called me Mama. Now Paula calls me her when I'm standing right there. I don't remember when I became invisible. Only that it felt familiar. They never asked me to cook. But they never stopped me either. Every meal, I hoped for a thank you. Even a smile. But silence became the norm. The kind that hums just before something breaks. That night it was me. I didn't cry. I didn't storm in with a dish rag. I just sat still. Listening. To them laugh at the woman who wiped their plates clean and vanished behind the sink. Like a shadow. Like help. I looked down at my apron. Spotted with sauce and something else. Something bitter. Not anger. No, not that. Disappointment has a different weight. Heavier. Quieter. I folded the cloth. Hung it by the window. It swayed a little in the draft. Then I asked myself, if they could forget me this easily, what else had I let them erase? Would you? Have you ever watched your dignity slip down the drain? And just kept rinsing? Share your story. I'm still listening. The house I gave up had yellow shutters. They flaked in the summer heat. But I loved them anyway. There was a porch swing. It creaked. Especially in October. I used to sit there with Harold. My husband. Hot cider in hand. Blanket over our knees. We did not have much. But what we had, we earned every inch. Harold passed 12 years ago. Heart gave out in the middle of breakfast. One moment he was buttering toast. Next thing I knew he was gone. The house felt too quiet after that. Even the fridge seemed to hum louder. Elijah came every Sunday at first. He would bring groceries. Talk about work. I always made pie. Apple in fall. Peach in July. Then the visits slowed. Life got busier. His voice sounded rushed. One day, he sat across from me. Did not touch the pie. Hands folded. Eyes tired. Mom. I'm in trouble. I already knew. He had that look. Same one he had when he broke the neighbor's window at 13. This time it was money. Credit cards, late payments, a car loan. Paula had just lost her job. They were behind on rent. I didn't ask why. I didn't raise my voice. That's not how I was raised. I made tea. The Earl Grey kind he liked. Then I asked, how much? He gave me a number. It made my throat tighten. I went into the back bedroom. Pulled the envelope from my dresser drawer. Savings. 42 years of leftovers and skipped dresses. I handed it over. All of it. Elijah cried. I just rubbed his hand. You'll pay it back in time, I said. He nodded. But he never did. 2 months later, I sold the yellow house. Got a modest price. It needed work. I gave Elijah a down payment for the house we live in now. He promised it would be shared. Promised I would always have my space. He meant it, I think. Back then. I remember the first night in the new place. We ate takeout on the floor. No furniture yet. Elijah laughed when I spilled sauce on the carpet. Paula smiled at me. She actually smiled. For a moment, I thought this was going to work. It didn't last. The boxes stayed packed longer than I expected. Mine, I mean. I kept thinking we would unpack them together. Put up pictures. Choose curtains. But days passed. Then weeks. My things stayed in the guest room. One outlet. No closet rod. A draft that whispered through the night. I tried to make it feel like home. Hung my wedding photo above the dresser. Laid out my old quilt. Tucked lavender under the pillow. It didn't help. The walls were bare. The windows too small. The silence too large. Paula took charge of decorating the rest. She called it minimalist. Said too much furniture made her anxious. She bought a white rug for the living room. Told me not to wear slippers in there. They shed lint. Elijah did not say much. He always looked tired. Always busy. I tried to help. Made breakfast every morning. Cleaned up after dinner. Folded the laundry before Paula got to it. No one asked. But no one stopped me either. That's how it starts, I think. Not with a command. Just with space. Space they stop offering. And start expecting. One morning, I found a note. Groceries are low. Could you pick some up? No name signed. Just stuck on the fridge. I went. At the store I bumped into Mrs. Boone. She lived across from our old house. Her husband had passed too. You look tired, Gloria, she said. I smiled. Told her I was just adjusting. But the smile didn't reach. That night, I made dinner. Meatloaf. Mashed potatoes with real butter. Paula barely touched it. Elijah said he already ate at work. I sat there anyway. At the table I helped pay for. Staring at 2 plates half full and 1 plate clean. Mine. Afterward, I cleared the dishes. The kitchen light flickered above me. I washed. Rinsed. Dried. Elijah walked past without looking. Paula followed, scrolling on her phone. Neither said a word. Not even a simple thanks, Mom. I looked at the sponge in my hand. It was wearing down. Just like me. Sundays used to be my favorite. At the old house, Elijah would bring Paula over. I'd make roast chicken. We'd eat in the garden. Talk about movies, weather plans. Now Sundays felt quiet. But not the peaceful kind. This new house had a colder rhythm. No one gathered. No one lingered. That Sunday I woke early. Started cinnamon rolls. They were Elijah's favorite. The scent filled the house. Warm sugar, butter, dough. No one came downstairs. At 10 I heard the garage door. Car pulling out. They had gone hiking. Left without a word. I sat at the table. Tea in one hand. An extra plate beside me. No one used it. I put the rolls in a tin. Left them on the counter. No note. Let them wonder who made them. That afternoon, I folded clothes. The laundry room was small, with one window that let in dusty light. I found Elijah's old college sweatshirt. The one I used to dry on the line. Still had a tiny tear near the hem. I ran my fingers over it. He wore this when he got his first job. He hugged me that night. Told me I couldn't have done it without you. That felt like a different lifetime. Now when he spoke, it was short. Quick. Functional. Once I asked him about his work. He answered with 3 words, then walked away. I tried not to take it personally. Maybe he was tired. Maybe stressed. but the silence grew roots. Deep ones. Paula filled the space with brightness. New pillows. Fresh candles. A big gold-framed mirror in the hallway. She turned my quiet into her studio. Filmed videos with ring lights. Told followers about intentional living. Once I walked past the open door. Heard her say, "Sometimes we must let go of old energy to welcome peace." I did not know if she meant me. But it felt like she did. Later I found my crochet basket stuffed under the sink. It had been by the armchair. My corner. No one said anything. But it was clear. There was no room for me. Not in the videos. Not in the hallway. Not even in the silence. I opened the back door. Stepped outside. The air smelled of grass and distant firewood. Somewhere down the street, a child laughed. I sat on the back steps. Folded my hands. And realized. I did not know what this house was anymore. A gift a shelter. Or just a place where I was allowed to fold laundry and disappear between the walls. It started with the calendar. The family one. Hung near the pantry. Color-coded with plans. I used to write in birthdays. Church bake sales. Tyler's school play. Now my pen was missing. And my name too. Paula had replaced it with a whiteboard. Minimalist, she said. She drew hearts for date nights. Arrows for appointments. One Saturday, dinner with friends, no interruptions. I was not sure who that applied to. But I stayed in my room. The guest room. Though no one called it that anymore, they called it her space. Not Mom's, not Gloria's. Yes. Heh. Once I asked Elijah if he wanted cornbread for Sunday. He glanced up from his phone. Oh. Paula is making something new. Something gluten-free. You will like it. He did not ask if I liked it. He told me. Sunday came. The kitchen smelled of vinegar and kale. I stayed out of the way. After lunch I began clearing plates. Instinct. Paula stopped me. No, it is okay. You can rest. Tyler will do it. But Tyler was napping. So Paula did it herself. Loudly. With a little hum in her throat. Like I was not even there. I stood near the archway. Hands damp with soap from habit. Watching her move through the kitchen like it belonged only to her. Later that day I reached for my apron. It was gone. I found it shoved in the back of the hallway closet. Under old wrapping paper and winter gloves. The same apron I wore every Sunday for 17 years. Harold bought it. A silly thing. Bright red with white trim. He said it made me look like I was cooking in joy. Now it smelled of dust. I did not put it back. I folded it. Placed it in the drawer beside my bed. Next to the sachets of lavender and my mother's handkerchief. That night I made myself tea. Earl Grey. No sugar. The mug chipped at the handle. Still my favorite. I sat by the window. Light off. Curtains half drawn. Through the hallway, I heard laughter. Paula again. She keeps hovering, she said. Elijah's voice was soft. She means well. Well, Paula snapped, I need space. The silence after that was sharper than any insult. I stopped being part of the greetings. When guests came over, Paula opened the door with a bright smile. This is our home, she would say. She gave tours. Pointed at decor. Described where things came from. Not once did she mention me. Even when I stood right there folding napkins on the table, her eyes slid past me. Like I was a coat rack. Useful but not worth naming. I listened from the hallway. Someone asked, do Elijah's parents live nearby? No, Paula replied quickly. His mother stays with us sometimes. I pressed my fingers into the edge of the wall. Steadying myself. Stays. like a visitor, like luggage. That night I set the table for dinner. 3 plates, forks on the left, napkins folded. When Paula walked in, she raised her eyebrows. "Oh, we were going to eat outside. Did you not see the group chat?" "I was not in the group chat." "I will move it," I said quietly. She waved a hand. "No, it is fine. But next time, just check first." Check with whom, I wondered. I used to be the one who decided where we sat, what we ate, when dinner was served. Now I followed instructions. Or stayed out of the way. I began to eat earlier. By myself. Simple meals. Toast. Soup. Soft fruit. Less to clean. I did not want to take up space. They never said it. But their eyes said enough. Tyler once came home from school with a painting. A family tree. He held it up proudly. Paula smiled. Elijah took a photo. I leaned over to look. Tyler had drawn himself, his mom, his dad, his dog. A big sun in the corner. No grandma. Not even a stick figure. No one said anything. Paula stuck the painting on the fridge. Right next to the grocery list. Right where my recipes used to be. I stood there, hands damp from the sink. Looking at a family that I raised, fed, loved, and somehow got erased from. One afternoon, Paula hosted her book club. 6 women. All pastel sweaters and almond cookies. I stayed in my room. Crocheting. Listening. The laughter came in waves. High, soft, then fading. Like wind chimes in a breeze. I thought nothing of it until I heard my name. "Well, Gloria is helpful," Paula said. The room chuckled. "She folds laundry like a machine," someone added. "And always so quiet," another woman chimed in. "Like part of the wallpaper." They laughed again. Gentle, but sharp. Wallpaper. That word stuck. I stared at my hands. Dry. Veined. Thread wrapped around my knuckles. The blanket I was making felt heavier. After they left, I stepped into the kitchen. The almond cookies were half gone. The good tray, my tray, was sitting in the sink unwashed. No one said thank you. No one asked if I wanted one. I rinsed the tray. Wiped it dry. Set it gently back in the cupboard. Later Elijah came in, rummaging through the drawers. "Mom, did you move the measuring cups?" "No," I answered. He sighed. "They are not where Paula left them." I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Not worth the argument. That night, I opened my dresser drawer. Took out the old envelope. Faded ink. My handwriting. The sale papers for my old house. Still folded. Still sharp at the corners. I held them in my lap. Let the weight of them settle. That house had yellow shutters. A porch swing. And my name on every utility bill. I paid it off with cafeteria checks and coupon books. This house was bought with that money. They had forgotten. But I had not. I slipped the envelope back. Closed the drawer. Saturday in silence. Not angry. Not yet. But something inside me was shifting. Not boiling. Not bursting. Just rising. Like a tide. Quiet. Certain. Coming closer. They started calling it their house. Not our home. Not the place we live. Theirs. I first heard it at the dinner table. Paula was chatting with her sister on speaker. "I just love what we did with our house," she said. "We are thinking of redoing the kitchen next." Elijah nodded. Did not look my way. I held my fork. Still. Firm. Redesigning the kitchen. The one I stocked. The one I cleaned. The one I bought with memories of Harold tucked under every tile. Paula showed her sister paint swatches. Muted sage. Cool, gray. Modern warmth, she called it. I wondered when my warmth became outdated. The next day, I found a contractor's card on the counter, next to my tea mug. His name was Jim. Smiled too wide. Said they had big ideas. I stood behind Paula as she pointed things out. This wall is useless. We are opening the space. She never asked what I thought. Not once. Later I opened the pantry. My slow cooker was gone. The one Harold bought when Elijah started high school. We used it for Sunday stew. I found it in the garage. Boxed. Labeled donate. No one asked. No one thought I would care. But I did. That night, I sat on the back steps. Wrapped in my old shawl. The one that smelled like lavender and starch. The porch light buzzed above me. Moths danced in and out of its halo. I watched them. Drawn to something that might burn them. And I thought, that is how I moved here. Drawn by love. Now caught in someone else's glow. Inside, Paula rearranged the living room. Elijah held a frame. It was the picture of Harold and me. Our wedding photo. Black and white. Smiling. Young. He looked around. Then slipped it into a drawer. Said nothing. Just kept moving. I checked the hallway the next morning. The photo was still gone. In its place a mirror. Big. Frameless. Too bright. It made the hallway look wider. But emptier too. I stood in front of it. Saw myself. Faded cardigan. Loose bun. Eyes not quite focused. I did not recognize that woman. And I wondered if they did. Paula walked past. Smiled. Looks clean, right, so much more light. I nodded. She did not ask where the photo went. And I did not say. That afternoon, a package arrived. Large. Flat. Wrapped in brown. Paula opened it in the living room. New prints for the dining area. She said. Abstract florals. Calming tones. Elijah nodded again. He did a lot of nodding these days. I watched from the archway. The wall she pointed at, that was where my needlepoint had hung. The one I stitched the winter after Harold passed. It said this house was built with soup, prayers, and patience. She had taken it down. Folded it, placed it in a drawer. The same one that now held the wedding photo. I opened that drawer later. Quietly. Felt the soft edge of the cloth. It smelled like cedar and neglect. I closed it. Softly. That night Elijah came into my room. He held a brochure. Mom, Paula wants to convert the garage into a studio, he said. Would you mind moving your storage boxes? My boxes. 2 of them. Old files, holiday linens, a quilt top I never finished. I had placed them there because there was no closet in my room. No space left elsewhere. Where should I put them? I asked. He looked unsure. Shrugged. Maybe. Donate what you do not need. Then he left. No plan. No place. Just leave space. I opened the garage door the next day. Stood under the single bare bulb. Dust floating like snow. My handwriting was still on the boxes. Winter things, GM photos. Elijah's first years. I rested my hand on the lid. Felt something shift inside me. Not rage. Not sadness. Just a quiet, sharp click. Like something unlocking. I brought the boxes into my room. Stacked them by the dresser. That evening I opened one. The one labeled photos, Elijah's first years. Inside, dusty albums. Loose prints. A paper flower he made in kindergarten. I lifted each item carefully. like lifting breath, like memory. At the bottom, a faded folder. I opened it. My hands slowed. Inside, copies of the house transfer. Notarized. Signed. Stamped. From when I sold my old home to help buy this one. Attached was a clause. Typed. Underlined. Primary occupancy rights and partial ownership shall remain with Gloria Manning until formal revocation in writing. I read it twice. Then a third time. My name. Clear. Firm. Not erased. Not yet. The paper smelled of ink and time. I sat back on the bed. Let it rest in my lap. My hands trembled, but not from age. From recognition. This house was not fully theirs. Not legally. Not by memory. It had been bought with sacrifice. With grief. With soup and prayers and patience. I stared at the closet door. Closed. White. Silent. Behind it, my quiet boxes. My vanished space. My stored name. Until now. I slipped the folder back inside. Closed the lid. Slid it under the bed. Elijah came home late that night. I heard the door. His shoes. The soft hum of Paula's voice greeting him. I sat still in the dark. No lamp. Only the light from the hallway cutting across the floor. I thought of saying something. Of holding up the document. Of asking, "Do you remember this?" But I didn't. I waited. Not for them. But for the right moment. Not to beg. Not to fight. Just to remind them. This house has my name woven into the wood. And paper, even quiet paper, can speak louder than anyone expects. That night I dreamed of yellow shutters. They were falling apart. One hinge loose. Paint peeling. But they were mine. I woke to the sound of dishes clinking. It was late. The house dim. Only the fridge light spilling onto the floor. I stepped into the kitchen. Paula was rinsing wine glasses. She did not hear me. Or pretended not to. Next to her, a guest basket. Wrapped in ribbon. Labeled for our weekend guests, "Welcome to our home." I looked at the label again. Our home. Mine was not part of the hour. In the corner, the armchair I once claimed now faced the wall. Covered in a throw I had never seen. The blanket I crocheted, the blue one, was nowhere. I turned back toward the hallway. Quiet. Still. Heavy. Inside my room, I reached under the bed. Pulled out the box. The folder was still there. Unchanged. But I had changed. When I found it, I felt power. Now. Just wait. I sat on the edge of the bed. Let the paper fall open on my lap. I traced the ink like a path back to something lost. Ownership. Partial. Retained. 3 words that felt both sharp and empty. I had rights. Yes. But did I still have place? I stared at the wall. The plain one. No mirror. No photo. Just beige. Harold used to say, if a wall's too plain, put your memories on it. But what if no one wants them there? I stood. Opened the closet. Looked at the few dresses I still wore. Pressed between them my old church coat. Navy wool. Frayed at the cuffs. I took it out. Tried it on. It still fit. Barely. The pockets were empty. Except for a folded tissue and a note. Faded but still legible. Mom, back by 8. Love you. Elijah must have written it when he was 12. I held it in both hands. So small. So long ago. 12 years old, he needed me. Now I was an extra. A background hum. A forgotten wall hook. I went to the bathroom. Turned on the light. Looked at my reflection. Deep lines. Tired eyes. Mouth set in something I could not name. Not anger. Not sadness. Just a vacancy. Like I had checked out without knowing. I turned off the light. Stood there in the dark. And whispered to no one. How did I let this happen? I sat at the table long after the house had gone quiet. My tea had gone cold. No steam. No scent. Just a cup of water that used to mean warmth. I held the folder again. Not tight. Not desperate. Just to feel its edges. To know it was real. Elijah used to sit here. Same chair. Spinning it back and forth until Harold would tap the table and say, "Keep your feet still, son." He would laugh. Always the laugh. Now the house felt too still. Even the clock seemed to tick softer. I opened the document. Read each line slowly. Line by line. Like scripture. Like proof that I was not imagining it. It was all there. My contribution. My conditions. My rights. And yet every hallway said otherwise. Every drawer. Every whisper. This house had begun to forget me long before I remembered that paper. I used to think sacrifice meant love. Now I wondered if it only meant disappearance. I stood. Walked to the hallway. Paused by the mirror Paula had hung. Stared at my reflection. This time I looked longer. My face was not bitter. Not harsh. Just tired. Tired of making room. Tired of folding into corners. Tired of waiting to be invited into a life I helped build. I turned toward the kitchen. Opened the drawer beside the stove. Inside the cinnamon tin. The same one I brought from the old house. Tucked behind new spices I could not pronounce. I unscrewed the lid. Closed my eyes. Breathed in. Warmth. Sundays. Harold's laugh. I let it sit there in my lungs a little longer. Then I put it back. Right where it was. Carefully. Without sound. The next morning Elijah passed me in the hallway. He smiled half-hearted. "Morning, Mom." I nodded. He did not notice the envelope in my hands. Or the way I held it like an anchor. He just kept walking. Late for work. I stood there a while. Watching the front door sway shut behind him. Then I looked down. At the folder. Not as a threat. Not as revenge. But as something truer than any conversation we had shared in months. Paper does not interrupt. It does not talk over you. It just waits. Ready. And so was I. I waited until the house was empty. Saturday morning. Paula had yoga. Elijah took Tyler to soccer. I stood in the kitchen. Sunlight on the tile. Soft. Clear. I dialed the number. Not saved in my phone. But still remembered. Mr. Hendricks. The attorney who helped me sell my old home. The man who made sure I had residual protection in writing. It rang twice. Then, his voice. Raspy. Measured. "This is James Hendricks." "Mr. Hendricks," I said. "This is Gloria Manning." A pause. Then a warm hum. "Mrs. Manning. I remember you." I held the phone tighter. As if memory could be reassurance. "I found the papers," I said. "I need to know if they still mean anything." He asked me to read a few lines. I did. Slowly. My voice steady though my hand trembled. Another pause. Then, "Yes. That clause is enforceable." The kitchen faded for a moment. No clinking. No refrigerator buzz. Only those words. Enforçable. He offered to email a copy of the original. Asked if I wanted to set up a meeting. "I would like that," I said. "As soon as you are able." We chose Tuesday. Late morning. After I hung up, I stared at the phone. My reflection shone faintly in the black screen. Not strong, but not afraid either. I made tea. Real tea. Poured it into the porcelain cup Harold had given me on our 30th anniversary. It had a crack now. A small one. But it still held warmth. I carried it outside. Saturday on the back steps. Watched the wind tug at the corner of the welcome mat. The one that read, "This is us." I let myself smile. Small. Brief. Because no, it was not us. Not anymore. Not yet. But something else was coming. Not anger. Not confrontation. Just reclaiming. Like planting seeds in soil that had forgotten what they were made for. Sunday morning, I woke before anyone else. The house was quiet. Too early for coffee. Too soon for disappointment. I pulled the old file folder from beneath my bed. Tucked it into my tote, wrapped it in a scarf. Just in case. I walked to the bus stop. It had been years since I used it. The bench was the same. A little more rust. A little more silence. I rode downtown. The city still yawned. Shops unopened. Sidewalks damp from night dew. Mr. Hendrick's office was above a barber shop. Same spot as before. The stairs creaked as I climbed them. He met me at the door. Older now. But kind eyes. The sort that still waited when you paused. We sat at a round table. No desk. No barrier. He read the document again. Nodded. "You have retained rights," he said. "Occupancy. Use of space. And if desired legal leverage." I said nothing. Only listened. He printed a few new forms. Clear language. Options. If I wanted, we could initiate a formal inquiry. A notice. Begin proceedings. But he looked at me carefully. "You do not have to do anything, Gloria," he said. "Sometimes, just knowing, is power." I folded the papers gently. Slipped them into the tote. "I may not use them yet," I said. "But I want to be ready." He smiled. Not big. But enough. On the way home, I bought lemons. And rosemary. I do not know why. I just did. Back in the kitchen, Paula barely looked up. "You were out?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Just that." I sliced the lemons. Put them in water. Let their scent spread through the house. Tyler wandered in. "Smells good," he said. I poured a little in a glass. Gave it to him. He smiled. Ran back to his room. I stood there. Alone again. But not empty. Behind the flower jar I hid the legal envelope. No one looked there anymore. Then I washed the cutting board. Dried it. Set it back in place. My hands moved slower. More deliberate. Like I was relearning something I had once known well. How to prepare. How to begin. How to reclaim space without raising my voice. That evening, I opened my closet. Took out the navy coat. Brushed off the dust. Hung it neatly. Then the drawer. The apron. The red one with white trim. I unfolded it. Smoothed its creases. Hung it behind the door. I was not putting on a show. I was taking inventory of what still belonged to me. My hands moved slowly over linens, over old recipe cards, over picture frames with empty backs. I did not cry. There were no violins in my chest. Only rhythm. Only breath. I brought out my sewing basket. Set it by the armchair. The one Paula had turned to face the wall. I turned it back. Faced the window. Let the morning light find it again. Next to it, I placed the blue blanket. The one I made. The one they hid. No one noticed. Not yet. But the house had started to shift. Tiny movements. Barely audible. Like the sound of ice melting in a glass. At dinner I did not cook. Did not ask. I set one extra place. Silently. No one filled it. But it was there. And I looked at it the way you look at an old scar that has stopped stinging but never quite faded. After they ate, Elijah stood to clear the dishes. His hand brushed mine. I held his gaze a second longer than usual. He blinked. Looked away. Something in him remembered. Maybe. Later I opened the hall closet. Pulled out a small box. Inside Harold's watch. Still ticking. I wound it twice. Held it to my ear. Then slipped it into my pocket. The next few days I made no announcements. No threats. But I tidied the pantry. Labeled the shelves, moved the cinnamon tin to the front. I was not hiding anymore. I was making room. For myself. For what was always mine. And as I stood in that quiet kitchen surrounded by things that once named me, I whispered, I am still here. Still standing. Still steady. And not one of them was ready for what that meant. Not yet. But they would be. Soon. The letter arrived on a Thursday. Plain envelope. Cream paper. No seal. No warning. I watched Paula open it. She stood by the sink, fingers moving too fast. Her eyes scanned. Then stopped. Brows tight. Mouth parted. Elijah, she called. He came from the hallway, still holding his phone. She handed him the paper. He read slowly. Then again. Then looked at me. I was sitting at the table. Folding napkins. The blue ones. My ones. This is from a lawyer, he said. Yes. I replied. He blinked. Held the letter like it might burn. Like it was written in a language he used to know but had long forgotten. What is this? Paula snapped. Why would you do this? I did not answer her. I looked at Elijah. His mouth moved before sound came. Mum. You're serious. I folded another napkin. Placed it neatly on the stack. I am simply requesting clarity, I said. My share. My space. My rights. Paula let out a sharp sound. Not quite a word. Not quite a laugh. This is your family, she said. You don't sue your own family. I stood up. Straightened my back. I have not sued anyone, I said. I have asked the law to remember what you forgot. Elijah stepped forward. Tired. Older than I remembered. Why now? He whispered. I met his eyes. Because I waited. And waited. And became invisible. And now I choose not to be. The room fell still. Only the hum of the fridge. The clock on the wall. My own breathing. I picked up the last napkin. Folded it slowly. Square. Even. Then I turned and walked back to my room. Not hiding. Not escaping. Just returning to the space that would soon be fully mine. They did not speak to me that night. The kitchen was quiet. No laughter. No music. Paula reheated leftovers. Ate in silence. Her fork scraped the plate too hard. Elijah sat with Tyler in the den. Pretended to be focused on a game. But his eyes kept flicking toward the hallway. Toward my room. I did not hide. I moved calmly. Took my tea to the table. Saturday in my usual spot. Not the corner. Not the side chair. My chair. They said nothing. Next morning I opened the pantry. Removed the baskets Paula had labeled. Sorted them. Replaced the layout. The cinnamon tin came to the front. My teacups returned to their hook. I left the cupboard doors open just enough. Visible. Firm. At lunch I made stew. Old recipe. Carrots, barley, thyme. The smell filled the house. Tyler came in first. He smiled. Is this the one with the soft potatoes? Yes, I said. And fresh rosemary. He sat without asking. Elijah followed. Paused at the doorway. Then sat down slowly. Paula came last. She looked at the table. At the bowls. At the folded napkins. Then at me. I served myself first. Then passed the ladle. Elijah cleared his throat. Mom. About the papers. I raised a hand. Gently. Not to silence. Just to pause. We can speak with civility, I said. Mr. Hendricks suggested a mediated meeting. Next week. He nodded. No fight in him. Just confusion. And maybe shame. Paula pushed her food with her spoon. You planned all this. No, I replied. I prepared. She scoffed. But I saw her hand shake just slightly. Later that day, I walked into the living room. The gold mirror was still there. But beside it now my framed needlepoint. I do not know who put it back. But I stood in front of it. Read the words aloud. This house was built with soup, prayers, and patience. And then quietly. And paper. Over the next few days the house shifted. Not loudly. Not in protest. Just shifted. The seat by the window, the one they once turned to the wall, now faced out again. I did not touch it. But it stayed that way. My crochet basket was no longer moved. It sat where I left it. Undisturbed. In the hallway closet, my coat hung freely. Not pressed between gift bags or forgotten scarves. Even the calendar changed. Paula replaced the whiteboard with a corkboard. I saw a small note pinned to it: dinner. Grandma's stew, written in Tyler's handwriting. Spelled wrong, but sweet. One evening, Elijah lingered in the kitchen. Watched me slice onions. Do you need help? He asked. I paused. Looked up. Then handed him a potato. He peeled in silence. But stayed. Paula remained distant. Polite. But cooler than before. I did not chase her warmth. Did not bend my back just to make her comfortable. I simply moved through the house as if I belonged. Because I did. The legal meeting was scheduled. Mr. Hendricks would join by phone. Elijah agreed. Paula tolerated. I did not expect apology. I did not seek revenge. Only recognition. And maybe a place at the table that was not conditional. The night before the meeting I laid out my papers. Double-checked my notes. Pressed my blouse. Polished my shoes. Not for them. For me. To remember that I was not just her in the hallway. Not just the hands that folded clothes or stirred soup. I was Gloria Manning. Widow. Mother. Owner. Builder of homes, even if no one noticed how much mortar I had poured. I stood by the kitchen window. Watched the porch light flicker. Listened to the wind. Soft. Confident. And I whispered, I will not be erased. Not quietly. Not kindly. Not ever again. We met in the dining room. Elijah sat at the end. Paula beside him. Her arms crossed. Face tight. I brought my tote. Set it gently beside me. Wore the navy blouse. Harold's favorite. On the phone, Mr. Hendricks spoke evenly. Warm but firm. Thank you all for taking the time, he began. This is not a confrontation. This is a clarification. Elijah nodded. Did not speak. Paula looked out the window. Jaw locked. I opened the folder. removed the original deed copy, slid it across the table. This, I said softly, is what we all signed. Elijah leaned forward. Read each line again. Slower this time. Mr. Hendricks continued. Mrs. Manning retained partial rights to the home's use and occupancy. Her presence is not by favor. It is by agreement. Silence. Then Elijah cleared his throat. I did not. I guess I forgot. His voice cracked on the last word. Mr. Hendricks paused. Then, memory does not undo legality. Paula scoffed. So what, she owns us now? I met her eyes. Steady. No, I said. I am not here to control. I am here to exist. Fully. Mr. Hendricks offered options. Maintain shared living. Formalize separate spaces. Or begin separation proceedings. He spoke like a clock. Each sentence ticked forward. Unstoppable. Unemotional. Paula looked at Elijah. Waited for him to fight. He did not. I think he said quietly, we forgot what this house cost. He looked at me. Not past me. At me. I saw something shift. Not guilt. Not pity. But recognition. It startled him. And steadied me. Mr. Hendricks closed the meeting with grace. No signatures yet. Just acknowledgement. But that was enough. For now. I gathered my papers. Tucked them back in order. As I stood, Paula rose too. You made your point, she said. I looked at her. And replied. I made my place. And I walked away. Not faster. Not taller. Just whole. The next morning, the house moved differently. No one said much. But the silence was new. Not heavy. Just unsure. Elijah came downstairs first. He poured 2 cups of coffee. Brought one to the table. Set it in front of me. No words. Just the clink of porcelain. And a glance that almost meant sorry. I stirred in cream. Took a sip. It was exactly how I used to make his. He remembered. Later that day, I opened the laundry room door. My basket was gone. But in its place a shelf. New. Labeled Mom's things. Not fancy. Not a gift. Just space. Clean. Clear. I placed my folded towels there. Next to my lavender sachets. Closed the door gently. In the living room, the gold mirror still hung. But now beside it, Harold's photo. And mine. Together again. I do not know who moved it. But it stood level. Centered. As if it had always belonged there. Tyler came home from school, backpack bouncing. He walked straight to me. Held out a paper. I drew this, he said. It was a picture of our house. Crayons. Wobbly lines. On the porch 4 figures. One had gray hair. A red apron. That's you, he smiled. I touched the drawing. My throat ached. But I kept my voice steady. Thank you, I said. You remembered. He nodded. Ran off to find his snack. I pinned the picture to the corkboard. Next to the grocery list. Above the old cinnamon tin. At dinner, Paula cooked. Something from a recipe site. Too many herbs. She placed the dish on the table. Cleared her throat. I made enough for all of us, she said. I sat. Took a serving. Chewed carefully. It was too salty. But I finished it. When I stood to take my plate, Elijah rose too. I've got this, Mom. He did the dishes. Tyler dried. Paula wiped the table. I walked back to my room slowly. Quietly. But this time, not alone in the silence. This time the silence made room for me. Saturday came. They had guests. 2 couples. Laughter. Wine. A cheese board Paula arranged with rosemary sprigs. I stayed in my room at first. Read a few pages. Stared at the ceiling. Listened. The house buzzed with voices. Chairs scooted. Glass clinked. Then I heard it. "She lives with you?" a woman asked. "She helped us get the house," Paula replied. Voice tight. Like the words stuck. "Oh," the guest said. Pause. Then laughter. I stood. Straightened my blouse. Ran a brush through my hair. And I walked out. Not dramatique. Not défiant. Just present. The room shifted slightly when I entered. I nodded to the guests. Picked up a cracker. Took a small bite. The salt and rosemary hit first. Then the hush. Elijah cleared his throat. "This is my mom," he said. "Gloria." The name landed. One guest smiled. Reached for the brie. Another asked me what book I was reading. I answered. Calm. Steady. Paula said nothing. But she did not interrupt. Later, as I poured tea into my cup, I noticed something. The mug. Blue porcelain. Chipped on the handle. Mine. It had been brought out. Used. Cleaned. Without being asked. Without needing to ask. I carried my cup to the armchair. The one by the window. My shawl folded neatly across the back. I sat. Crossed my ankles. Listened to the voices soften. For once, I was not waiting in the hallway, not eavesdropping from the shadows. I was in the room. With my name spoken. My seat taken. No applause. No toast. No grand apology. Just presence. Undeniable. Unshakable. And entirely mine. I sipped my tea. Watched the porch light flicker. Let the warmth rest in my hands. And I thought. This is what quiet justice feels like. No gavel. No shouting. Just a woman sitting in her own chair in a house she never truly left. Spring came quietly that year. No announcement. No burst of bloom. Just warmer mornings. Longer light. And a certain softness in the air that wrapped itself around the walls without asking permission. I started keeping the window cracked. Letting the breeze move through the curtains. Letting the house breathe again. It was the kind of breeze that smelled like soil, like wet concrete after rain, like old lilacs coming back to life. Tyler brought me daffodils from the yard. Short stems. Clumsy bundle. Some petals already bent. He grinned like he had brought gold. I placed them in a chipped jar. Set them on the table beside the teacups. No one moved them. No one rolled their eyes. No one said they clashed with the decor. That silence was its own kind of reverence. One afternoon, Elijah knocked gently. "Do you want to come to Tyler's art day?" he asked. I looked up from my sewing. The thread had knotted. I let it be. He added, "I mean, only if you want." He asked if Grandma was coming. The word caught me. Grandma. Still mine. I folded the cloth in my lap. Smiled. "Yes," I said. "I would like that." We drove together. Elijah drove slowly. Hands loose on the wheel. No music playing. Just the sound of the turn signal clicking like an old clock. At the school, Tyler ran toward me. "Look," he shouted. He held up a painting. Stick figures again. 4 people. A house. A tree with round yellow fruit. "That's you," he pointed. "The one with the blue dress." I had worn green that day. But I nodded. "It's beautiful," I said. Because it was. That night, I pinned it beside the old family photo. The one with Harold. The one that had come back to the wall. The house was quieter lately. Not tense. Just slower. Like it was listening more. Paula kept her distance. But she passed me a cup of tea once. Earl Grey. No sugar. No words. And that was enough. I started baking again. Not for approval. Not for thanks. Just because my hands missed the rhythm. Small things. Muffins. Apple slices with cinnamon. A pie once. They disappeared from the counter without thank yous. But also without being thrown away. That too felt like a shift. I taught Tyler how to fold towels. He made a game of it. Grandma corners he called them. He giggled as he pressed each edge flat. Took it seriously. Like it was magic. And maybe it was. One morning I stood in the backyard. Sunlight on my shoulders. Shoes in the grass. I looked at the house. The windows. The doorway. The frame I once funded, once cleaned, once lost myself inside. And I whispered. I stayed. Not as a guest. Not as a shadow. Not out of guilt. But because I could. Because I had the right. Because I still had something to give. Not control. Not money. Just rhythm. The slow, steady beat of someone who had not disappeared. No matter how quietly they had tried. April brought the first rain. Soft slanted. The kind that taps the window without rushing it. I stood in the kitchen. Watching it beat against the glass. A pie cooling behind me. Cinnamon still clinging to the air. Tyler wandered in. Hair tousled. He reached for a slice. I handed him a plate. He paused. Then said, "Your room smells like books and pie." I laughed. It was the truest compliment I had heard in years. He took the plate and ran off. Crumbs trailing behind him. Later Elijah came to the doorway. He leaned on the frame, hands tucked in his pockets. "Tyler's been asking about Grandpa a lot," he said. I nodded. "I can tell him." He hesitated. Then looked me in the eye. "Would you write it down?" he asked. "For him. For later." That night I opened a blank notebook. Not the kind with quotes on the cover. Just simple ruled paper. And I began. Harold liked his tea strong and his socks mismatched. He once planted carrots so crooked they looked like question marks. The words came easily. Not to record history. But to offer rhythm. Something to return to when voices are gone. I wrote about the porch light he always meant to fix. The back fence that leaned but never fell. About the house we built without nails, only soup, prayers, and patience. Days passed like that. Quiet. Intentional. One morning I stepped outside. The daffodils Tyler gave me had wilted. But beside them, new ones had bloomed. Brighter. Straighter. I trimmed them gently. Brought them in. Set them next to the cinnamon tin. I started keeping a drawer just for Tyler. Filled it with little things. Napkins he folded. Drawings he made. Notes he wrote and forgot. I labeled it. Belonging. No one touched it. They just let it be. And one evening, Paula sat across from me. Tea between us. No shields. No distance. She spoke quietly. "I did not know you were still holding so much." I looked at her. Not to scold. Not to absolve. Just to see her. "You were never meant to carry it alone," she added. I nodded. "Then help me pass it on," I said. We folded towels together. She asked about my recipe for cornbread. I told her to watch my hands. And she did. From then on the house moved with more breath. More noticing. Not perfect. But more awake. One night, I sat by the window. The pie had cooled. The hallway was still. I opened the notebook. Wrote one more line. Legacy is not what you leave behind. It is what stays warm after the room goes quiet. Then I closed it. Placed it on the shelf. Next to the photo of Harold. And the newest drawing from Tyler. 3 things that would remain. Even after he no longer did. The late light rested gently on the cinnamon tin and daffodils, and for once the house did not feel borrowed. I have learned that legacy is not a title deed. It is the drawer they no longer move, the recipe they whisper to each other, the corner they leave untouched because it still carries your breath. What quiet legacy do you hope to leave behind? We invite you to share your story in the comments below. You are not alone. Your journey matters. Subscribe to Grandma Radio, where every story is a second chance.